Mid 80s, the nature of crime is starting to change, right? We have a lot more drugs coming into every area. Crack cocaine, yeah. Tell me about that. Like, so you were starting out at the time that they were having this different phase of crime, essentially. Crack cocaine and everything else.
Yeah, good or bad. Right. I started in 86, and so I spent the first couple of years in patrol, and then I was fortunate to go to investigations, and then ultimately to narcotics relatively quick. And so right about the time, 89, 90, 91, I was embarking narcotics when this crack cocaine epidemic, there's movies now about narcos and all, how the crack epidemic hit communities like ours with violence. A lot of people were being shot, and there are people that come to me, oh man, it's kind of violent out there, isn't it? So you guys have no idea what it was in the mid 80s, in the early 90s, and I know because I was I was in the middle of all that. And so, yeah, it was an eventful time to be a law enforcement officer on the street. And you got to think, Pensacola was different back then. Pensacola, Belmont de Villiers was different than it is now. There was not Aragon was an Aragon court, and there was different. Crime was, I guess just a different animal back in the 80s and 90s than it is today.
Yeah, to me, looking back at these different areas and looking back on how this whole thing developed. I mean, look, we're in the business of crime. That's the God's honest truth. I tell people, if you want to talk about crime, come and talk to me. I almost have a PhD in it. But it seemed to me that crime was kind of like a sleeping giant back then that woke up. And then people started realizing, hey, these areas that we kind of let to their own devices have now gotten really, really
deteriorate,
bad. Right. Yeah. We had the Aragon court where people were just like, oh, it's downtown, whatever. And then it just goes downhill. Everything's falling apart. Everything is bad. And people stopped going downtown is what we really had. There's no reason to go downtown unless you work down there.
Right. And that was my beat. I remember working on a Christmas Eve, and I was a rookie police officer, and media comes down, Channel 3, WAR comes down and said, oh, we want to talk to people that have to work on a holiday. And so they choose to interview me, and because I was one of the few people that were working down there. And you're right. I remember almost no one being down on Palafox. We were there used to be a store called Newberry's. And so I was right in front of that store, and they say, hey, can we talk to you? Sure, we can talk about it. So I gave them all of this, it's tough to have to work and being away from your family. I was 21 years old, 22 at the time, I guess. And I explained to them that someone's got to do the job, and it's very important. And of course, I didn't realize that it was against our policy to talk to the media without the chief knowing about it. I found out about that.
Yeah, I can get it.
On the day after Christmas, I found out that was not a good thing to do. But I was famous for a day, for on Channel 3. But your point is, downtown was not what it is today. I mean, it was almost, I can't even think of anyone that was down there now that was down there back in the day. And again, that's a lot like what you talked about. Aragon was different. Belmont de Villiers was different. You could name a number of different places now that are just different. And you can make the argument culturally, is it better or worse? But I will tell you that the media wasn't aware of all the crime. We didn't have social media. We didn't have a camera on every phone. We didn't have an avenue where people could engage and say, hey, what happened on this street or on that street? So quite frankly, they didn't know unless the police department or sheriff's office put a press release out, or unless the media was there, called on the landline to get down.
Yeah, back then all you really had were these hand-me-down stories. Right. Oh, so-and-so was stabbed over there, or so-and-so was shot over there. That's really all you had. But still, I mean, I remember as a kid, I heard the story of a gentleman being shot essentially under 110, kind of where they now have that swimming pool, the public swimming pool. Yeah. I remember a guy getting shot with a shotgun over there, got shot in the head. But that was just one of these things where you would hear about, but you're right, it wasn't on the news. They weren't broadcasting the trial or anything like that. Right. It was just like, oh, the guy was shot, and don't go to that area.
Yeah, that's even internally. We weren't as good about emails, and we didn't have an avenue where we could share intelligence, and we could like the way we do now. Back then, we had a blotter. So they passed out a sheet of paper, and they didn't want to waste paper, so everyone passed out the same sheet of paper, and we looked at it, and then we jotted it down on our notepad. Like the TVs, we put the little book in our pocket, and we walk around with it. And then if we stopped to talk to someone, what we call FI, or field interview an individual, then we would take out that book and we'd write their name down, and then that's the value of having an experienced law enforcement officer, because their book was a little thicker than us rookies had, and you learn a lot by talking to people. You learn a lot by getting out of your car and walking and talking to people in neighborhoods, and prostitutes, and business owners. And we were trained to do that sort of thing, because that's how you build intelligence. We had Polaroid cameras, so you have your own little Rolodex of the people that might be good for a fraud, or people might be good for a robbery, or that sort of thing. So
human intelligence.
It was a unique opportunity, and it's it was certainly a growing experience for me.